Welcome to Not Entirely Unlike Tea with Christine Collins. Hey there, it's Christine Collins, and today I wanted to talk about creativity from the standpoint of not having any productive requirement attached to it. And there are many, many versions of this, everything from drawing to writing to various forms of art. And I think very often as an adult, and particularly if you are entrepreneurial at heart, it can be quite tempting that when you are doing creative work to pause even for a moment and consider whether or not there's any way in which to create it into some type of a sellable product or service. But there are actually quite a few benefits to creativity as a whole. And today specifically, I thought it might be fun to look at something that we often think of as being solely for children, and that is coloring. I think that sometimes we have been almost kind of trained that to do a leisure or fun activity, it has to be earned. It has to happen after all the other work is done. It has to happen rarely, or it has to be monetized in some way. And what's messy about that is the very act of putting all of those rigid restraints around it can often inhibit the sheer enjoyment of the creative activity. So the activity specifically of coloring, whether you're using colored pencils, markers, crayons, there's obviously a wide variety of ways that you can do that activity. You're actually engaging both hemispheres of your brain at the same time. Your more logical left hemisphere is doing a little bit of planning, thinking about which area you want to tackle next, which color you want to use in a specific location, which colors look good next to each other, staying inside the lines. All of that is a little bit more of that logical side, whereas the more creative right hemisphere has the more imaginative, expressive, and visually intuitive type of work. And often in life in general, we're leaning more heavily towards one side or the other with the various tasks that we're doing. But this is an activity that kind of collaborates both sides together at the same time, having that bilateral activation, and that can kind of strengthen the connection between them. And long term, there are some benefits there by strengthening that connection, memory, problem solving, and even cognitive flexibility. And there's kind of a soft, gentle activation of the frontal lobe, that decision making, the organizing, the planning, the focus. But it's different than doing something like answering emails or working on a work-specific project, because there's a difference in the way there's a little bit less of a stress response. So it's activated just enough to kind of stay engaged, but in a more relaxed way, with less of a sense of urgency, lower stakes, less verbal cognitive load, and lower demand. And what's interesting with an activity like coloring is that the amygdala, which is the stress response area, tends to quiet down a little bit because of the focused, repetitive nature of coloring, where our attention is pulled into the moment. There's that soft focus and the sense of accomplishing something, but in a way that sends more of a safety signal to the nervous system. Your breathing might slow down, your heart rate might slow down, it might feel like a less threatening activity. And so when that amygdala relaxes, there's a whole neurological cascade after that. Stress hormones easing up, more access to rational thought, and even mood lift. And one of my favorite things about an activity like this, and different people access this in different ways, but it's known as flow state. And flow state is a feeling of immersion, being completely absorbed in what you're doing, that soft focus with a decrease in the default mode network. And that's where we do all of our ruminating and our self-criticism and our self-doubt, and all of the repetitive thoughts that can happen kind of goes a little bit quieter. That mental chatter might slow down a little bit, and we can tap into this flow state sensation because it's an activity that can fall just in between being too easy and too hard. That's usually when we hit a flow state, where we have the skills and capability to do the task, but it still requires a little bit of focus, a little bit of a challenge from us. Because if it's too easy, your brain will not really focus, not really pay attention, will kind of drift a little bit. And if it's too hard, then it creates anxiety. So coloring creates that moderate level of complexity and challenge where we can become fully absorbed in what we're doing without getting overwhelmed. And even just a short period of time, 15 or 20 minutes, doing an activity like coloring can help to get you into that flow state and let you get some of those cognitive benefits from it. And those benefits can carry on long after you stop doing the activity. And the nice thing about an activity like this one is that it engages your mind enough that some of the tendencies that some of us may have in a slower paced, quieter activity where maybe the mental chatter does kick up a little bit, like we don't really want to sit alone quietly with our thoughts, that can be kind of eliminated by the physical movement and motion and that little bit of planning and considering and deciding, decision making, kind of figuring out where you want to place the next color. Your brain is actually getting absorbed with that focus in a way that can quiet down some of those other things that might normally crop up. Coloring is kind of like an anchor almost in that sense. It's a repetitive motion with a very consistent and predictable sensory input. Then we have visual engagement where we're doing something that's interesting and relaxing, and if you're enjoying the images, you're appreciating something that's not emotionally heavy or loaded or even socially demanding like a conversation would be. And it's also nice because there's containment, so we don't have to generate something completely on our own. We're filling in lines, filling in spaces in a creative way where we get to make choices, but we don't have to be generative in that particular moment. And that can sometimes feel like a relief, particularly if you have to do a lot of content generation or difficult decision making the rest of the time. And there's kind of no wrong way to do it. If you're not happy with it at the end, you can throw it away, you can start over again. It's not the sort of thing that you feel the need to share or that anybody else even ever has to see unless you choose to. In addition to that, there's a lot of satisfaction to completing something that's relatively simple to complete. A low demand activity with passive downtime where we can be gently engaged, and then there's a dopamine satisfaction in completing something small, finishing even a section of a page or a portion of the drawing, and then building in those small repeatable activities to maybe complete a whole page or even a whole book. It doesn't require any specific training. It doesn't require you to learn how to do something specifically new or to be good at art or good at a particular skill set. It also has the benefit of being precise and repetitive and relatively slow. There's no need to rush through it or to complete it in a hurry or to do it on any kind of a deadline. It's slow, it's deliberate, and it's also non-screen based. It's paper based. So you're getting a break from devices during that period of time. And honestly, these days, that's difficult to find. There are not a lot of activities where there's no screen or device needed. Even many creative activities that we might otherwise engage in often require a screen. Like if you're writing or creating images, graphics, templates, and that sort of thing, a lot of times those things are happening on a computer screen or some type of device. So it can feel like a true break from many of the things that can feel taxing in our ordinary everyday world. So there are tons of neurological benefits, mindset benefits. It can be very uplifting to your mood. And I also think it can help to connect us back to an earlier sense of innocence and positive childhood memories, and I do absolutely recognize that that may not be the case for everyone. But if it is something that resonates, it can be sort of a guilt-free leisure activity because it can be done in very short spurts. Even if you only have 5 minutes, you can do a short little piece of a page and then come back to it later. And of course, there are many other creative activities that can help us to get into this type of flow state. There are many tools that can help us to get into this flow state. We talk often about the alpha brainwave, and tools like meditation, hypnosis, yoga nidra are really valuable for tapping into some of those brainwaves. But while I typically talk about those types of tools like hypnosis and yoga nidra, I thought it might be fun and interesting for me to try my hand at creating something new. And so I have also created a coloring book for adults in a theme that I personally enjoy. It's got kind of a whimsical, fantastical nature to it. And if it's something that you're curious to test it out for yourself, to see if you enjoy coloring as an adult, or perhaps you already know it's something that you really like doing as an adult, I certainly encourage you to check it out. I'll pop a link into this podcast in case you're interested. And I encourage you to explore your creativity in whatever way you wish to, whether it's with this or with something else, because I really believe that many of these neuroscientific benefits that we talked through today are accessible to us, and we often don't take advantage of them. We often don't make the time for them. We don't make the time for leisure time and creative time and enjoyment of something that doesn't have to be productivity focused. So I definitely encourage you to find ways to do that for yourself. And until we connect the next time, I wish you the most magical and creative rest of your day. Thanks for listening. This is Christine Collins at ravenmosaic.com.